This is Marco from SIX, the Asia lead of Social Innovation Exchange. We are just starting this webinar of the 6 global dialogues, the open duets at the SIXWayfinder, on the topic of how to support and drive community innovation through bridging across sectors. And we're very happy to have 2 contributors with us today. The first is Amalia, from the former deputy mayor from Athens, Amalia.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. You know, I am a fan of Social Innovation Exchange, and I love the work that you do. I still learn from you all the time. So I'm very happy to be able to contribute.
Thank you, Amalia. And also we have another contributor coming from another part of the world, which is Malaysia. So we have Hamdan from Think City. So hi, Hamdan.
Thank you very much, Marco, for your kind introduction. And I'm glad that Amelia were able to connect on this call. And thank Social Innovation Exchange for connecting us. And hopefully that we have an engaging and interesting conversation through the next hour.
Yeah. Thank you.
I love
Thank
this.
You so much.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I just love this musical score you have created, and that this is a duet.
Yes.
Hamdan, do you play music?
I love music, but I don't play music.
I used to play flute, and we had duets, piano and flute duets. So I love.
So having said that, thank you, Amalia. So having said that, this is one of the events we framed as an open duet at the SIXWayfinder. So SIXWayfinder is one of the global flagship programs that organized by Social Innovation Exchange. We are in the movement number 2, which is ensembling. We're bringing together 2 leading figures in community-led innovation as a duet, in conversation, in exchange, to reflect and also to tell us a little bit how their experience and insight in supporting and driving community innovation through cross-sector collaboration. And personally, I love performing arts. I love singing. I always sing duets with my friends. I sing musical theater, and we believe like there are a lot of chemistry, there are a lot of exchange, and also emotional connection, even we're from different part of the world. So today, both Amalia and Hamdan will be sharing the experience from Greece to Malaysia when they are in position in driving community innovation in their city, in Athens and in Penang. And of course, Think City now expand to other cities also in Malaysia. So we always believe in grassroots and community-led actions. And in social innovation, we always talk about citizens' power. In many of the cities around the world, community action is very important part of the cultural fabrics. So during the pandemic, actually, we see a lot of community action in supporting each other, and how these energy can from the community tackle problems themselves. So these are something very beautiful that we see at SIX. And we brought together Amalia and Hamdan because they both have experience and like insight across the years. So to start, I would like to invite maybe first Amalia and then Hamdan to share with us a little bit about your city, the story and the context at and in Athens and Penang. So maybe I'll pass the time to Amalia, please.
Okay, so I'll take you to syncopation, as they say in musical score, because I'll take you back, not away geographically from Malaysia, but also back in time. Because what we did in Athens started about 10 years ago with the previous financial crisis, a time where the social fabric was collapsing and a lot of invisible grassroots initiatives were being born and surfacing in the city. Of course, who could see them? There was no mechanism to collect them, to see them. They were invisible to the eyes of the municipality. But it was a time where I realized that in my city, there were a lot of spontaneous, informal, and very kind of positive best practices, all very small scale, around the block, helping your neighbor, cleaning the garbage, designing the playground that was abandoned, planting, guerrilla gardening in abandoned areas, small, but many of those. So this is the context of 10 years ago in Athens, and how the platform that later on became part of the municipality started. Now, today, I'm no longer an activist. At the time, I was myself part of those initiatives, and that's how I knew about them. Today, I'm no longer part of that. So I don't know. I hear from friends what's happening, and I know from, I've been helping, my parents who are old, and, their friends who are old during the COVID situation, but I can't see what is happening. I don't know, Hamdan, can you?
Thank you, Amalia. So maybe, Hamdan, you can introduce a little bit about your work and also your context, like in Think City.
I think, what do you call Malaysia? I think probably I just talk general context of Malaysia. Malaysia is in Southeast Asia, and it is one of those seem to be tiger economies. Over the last slightly over 6 decades, we have gone from a very poor low-income country into a now upper middle-income country, and it is in this context that Penang was located. Penang as a city region is an old port city established by the British about nearly 200 years ago. Probably the right date was 1786. Organized settlement was established by the East India Company. But from there it grew, and it has flourished. So up to the time of independence, the port was the main activity, and port and all the related activities. In Georgetown, the city itself was then established on being a city that was a port city. And it was a great port city. There were many local and global personalities, events, that took place. But with the independence and the region as a whole was coming into what I call a post-colonial environment, the need for the idea of a free port lost its purpose, and everything became more centralized. And the city itself had started to go into a state of decline and decay. While the rest of Penang, which was then eventually moved from a port city to become a global industrial hub, we became very successful, whereby became a successful technology-based manufacturing hub similar to Taiwan and in Seoul in Korea, where we were actively involved in the production of electronics, manufactured goods and services. However, the city itself started decaying and went into a state of decline. And it was in this context that our journey started in 2008, where we decided that there is a need to relook and reassess. Now, 2008 is an interesting moment in timing, because that was the period where the UN Population Bureau had marked out to say that there were more people living in urban areas in first time in human history than any time before. And it was also the moment where Penang was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Georgetown in particular was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it was a moment in Malaysia where we saw political transition. We have had a one-party rule for nearly 60 years of our independence. And it was at that moment in time that that we saw a political shift, a political tsunami. So it was an interesting year in a series of events. So it was in the context of change that we established an entity, because we felt that no longer the world was focused about between nations, the fault line of competition was moving to cities. And for cities to succeed, it was cities cooperating and collaborating together. And there was a need to reassess. So we felt that Penang City region had to re-establish itself and repurpose itself if it's going to be successful. So that's when we reassessed the potential of Georgetown with the inscription of UNESCO World Heritage Site. We set forth a program and where we established Think City as a platform to harness what we call the energy of the private sector and the community in driving a process to engage government to collaborate to rehabilitate the city. So Georgetown, which was not in anywhere in the radar screen, in fact, it fell into so much disfavor, and it was not even in the it within a decade, it has become one of those top 5 destinations that Lonely Planet identifies as a place to visit. Cultural heritage has become a new icon and driver for the economy. Citizens who were part of the process were all engaged. And one of the things that you found in Penang was there was a high level of civil society engagement. And that civil society engagement and participation was harnessed in that process of change. They became actors. And that is from where we have come. Based on that journey, we felt that, this is something that could be beneficial for Malaysia and the region in general. So we decided to expand the program to other cities where we felt that you could create an organization that works at the intersection between government, community, and businesses, and finding ways to what we call to synergize, connect, engage, and co-create. Because at the end of the day, it's all in the fault line that lies where we find innovation and change, and how do you harness it to make a difference? And that's been our story.
Yeah, thank you, Hamdan. It's very interesting to see when there is like as an intermediary, like you guys pull together different expertise and resources. And I'm sure, Amalia, I know your story. You started as a community activist, but you slowly gain momentum and join the government. So tell us a little bit more about your personal story also, like how do you harness different energy and put you in that place, and how do you use that as a driving force to drive community innovation?
Yeah, I liked what you mentioned, Hamdan, about culture, the cultural shift of Penang, because this is a little bit what happened with Athens. So as those small scale initiatives spontaneously kind of spurted around the city, that was a moment where Athens, which is known for its heavy cultural heritage, right? Athens is so well known for that. But it's an identity that did not encompass what people were feeling about their city entirely. We're not only, the descendants of the ancient Greeks. We are lots of other things. And these spontaneous activities included things like guiding tours in unknown neighborhoods of Athens, showing a reality that was kind of hidden from the tourists and, the world eye, the tourist eye. And this, I think, surfaced a new identity for Athens, an identity of diversity. And so at that moment, and why was that possible? Because, of course, the crisis give opportunities. We have to think of it now. They open windows where the resistance of the system is less harsh and hard, and you can establish new ways of doing things, and maybe even new governance models. And the governance model, of course, we were seeking was one where community activities, community groups, even those informal ones, could enter into a positive, creative dialogue with the authorities. Something that up until that moment was not in the culture of the local administration. So I, being an activist outside, of course, and had never been actually involved in politics in any other way, I pitched the idea to the mayor at the time to create a platform for the municipality and collect this richness and diversity of ideas and activities in particular, people doing things, not talking, as at the time there was so little credibility in politicians' talk. It was what people were doing that was important, not what they were saying, very important at the time. So he accepted. So I move in the municipality, of course, trying to kind of enter the vocabulary of this spontaneous activism in the bureaucratic context of the administration. it was a moment where I created a lot of enemies. I mean, people from the community groups saw me a little bit as entering the enemy's terrain, you know, becoming one of those they were against. So since we're talking about bridging, you know, the developing a vocabulary, you know, that can include and show, you know, that these are not two different things, not two different tribes. That was very important. So I personally focused not only in creating a platform that would collect and see this invisible, let's say, dynamism of the city, but also create trust. You know, somehow trust had to come into the game. You know, how would the one trust the other in order to enter into dialogue and do things together? So that was, you know, the second very big, I think, pillar in this effect. I mean, I can talk for hours about this, but I think I come back to this word, trust. You know, it's a buzzword, unfortunately, but it means so much if you go into it. Because if people don't, I mean, if those different eyes, whether it is community groups, as you say, Hamdan, and private sector and public sector, you said, you know, you're trying to create a dialogue between different pillars. How do you create an environment of social trust so that ideas and things can start to appear and be born? Because the projects you want for the city have to come, you know, are usually ideas that come. I mean, we have to reinvent the way things are done because we see that the system has cracked. It doesn't work any longer.
I think,
so we have to.
Yeah, I probably agree with you, Amelia, in the sense that the points that you raise about identity and trust, things that are very central in a sense that, you know, cities has always been about people all through what you call human existence. From the time from the first cities that emerged to today, the whole idea of cities has been about a meeting point, a place of exchange, what do you call, a place of hope and possibility, and so on. The anchor of that at the end of the day was mutual trust, collaboration, what do you call, the idea of that you engage one another, civic behavior, consciousness, and so on. So, and I think that is the fundamentals, you know, being, I guess, you know, coming from Athens, I don't need to talk to you much about those things, but maybe I could raise to say that, you know, I think conflicts and contestations are very interesting elements because what we see is that people are instead of conflict and contestation because they love the, what do you call, the cities or the places or the projects very much, and they are opposing voices. Now, what needs to be worked out in the sense that how do you, I think we can agree to disagree, and I don't expect everyone to accept, but it's the process of how you go around getting people to participate in and allow them the safe space to voice, but and provide inputs and be part of a process of change is fundamental. Because I think in the absence of that, you know, is antagonism that we harness, which then becomes a negative trait. While conflict and contestation can be also be harnessed to become a positive energy. So the question is, how do you drive that energy of conflict and contestation, whether to the negative or the positive side, that enables the city to become a great place, and also bringing that focal point. You know, at the end of the day, you know, there's a compact between citizen and state, and that compact is based on the idea of trust and the fact that what you call the state is a representative of the citizen, and but it's also their what do you call, not only moral responsibility, but it is their fiduciary responsibility to ensure that they act in the best interest of the citizen. Now, word citizen is added. And that sends a kind of contestation of views that the state then faces the challenge of then figuring out which pathways do you chart, because, you know, there's so much of voices out there. And I think that's going to be the kind of challenge that we need to figure out, in the sense that the ability to lead in times of chaos and thriving through chaos is going to become that what do you call skill sets and capabilities that is needed to survive. Yes, Amalia, you're saying something.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to forget to add that this art of bridging, art of bringing people together, people from different points of view together, is in itself a skill that is not developed enough in the professional sector of, you know, public service and public servants. It's something, it's a professional skill. It's something that we have to add in what we are doing, something that we did not commit in and invest in enough previously. Now that governments understand that they cannot do without this communication, we have to invest in people like, you know, like what you're doing, Hamdan, in Think City, you know, to actually bring people together in a very methodical and transparent way, which takes its time and its commitment.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see how you guys talk about trust and how you guys think about developing common languages in talking about bringing different people together, and also to talk about love, like how to turn people who are supposedly, but they all love the city, but they are kind of opposing and striking for something, how to turn that energy from oppose to propose. This is very important when we talk about like bringing people together, developing a common language for them, and the need for intermediary, like what Amalia you said, the art of bridging, like that's how intermediary can facilitate and comes in. And I think there are some technical issues that Hamdan just
where's Hamdan?
but I'm sure my colleague will get him back soon. But maybe at this point, Amalia, you can talk a little bit about like you did mention a little bit like when you enter the establishment.
Yeah.
People think that you are like you make a lot of enemies. So how do you handle that? And the communication between governance body and now you were in the governance body. How do you communicate back, and how do you be the bridge at that time, back in the time?
Well, at that time, you know, it was when we created the platform that would collect the community, the activities of the community groups. It was just a matter of time, you know. Becoming the enemy was not an issue. It was just a matter of time and patience to see how, you know, we would start doing things together, and even better than before, because now if you had the municipality on board, you could clean better, help better, do things better. So I had to convince the services of the municipality to invest in what those activists were doing. And of course, little by little, at the beginning, it was only word of mouth that you know, how we collected, you know, those activities. That was one way. And then, of course, the platform was based on not only creating a dialogue, but showing trust the other way around. Instead of them trusting municipality trusting them, which meant giving them space, giving them, you know, a place, you know, a building, for example, to create their ideas, to be together. It was about the other way around. And of course, move from dialogue to co-creation little by little. It was very interesting to see how at the beginning there was a lot of suspicion. You know, how could they become decision makers suddenly? Some of them, you know, entered this dialogue, and little by little, we started, you know, implementing projects like giving, you know, a public market that was empty to one of the community groups to handle it and manage it. So that broke the ice, let's say, little by little, gradually.
I think it's important to cultivate the mutual understanding when we always talk about thinking outside of the box, but actually we need everyone to think inside of the box. like now the activists need to understand the rationale of policymaking, but at the same time, the municipality people need to understand what the activists are thinking, how, and throughout the process, your platform, that they work together slowly on small projects, taking baby steps, then they know they have evidence, they build rapport with each other, and then the things like naturally goes on and work on bigger project and bigger project. So it's very interesting to see how collaboration happens with small actions and steps.
Yes, and you just rely on also on your relationship experience. You know, we actually brought people from the municipality, city officials, you know, the kind of old bureaucrats, you know, the caricature of these with kind of informal, you know, anarchist looking activists in the same room. And we start, and you know, I introduced them to each other. You know, we did workshops so that they would tell each other, you know, it's like marriage counsel almost. You know, what do they hate about each other? What do they think? What are the prejudices about each other? I mean, all sorts of ways, you know, to break the ice.
Yeah. So I'm sure Hamdan, you're back now. Just now, maybe there are some technical issue. Hamdan, when your projects in Think City in Malaysia, when we talk about bridging people, there are always tensions. Like, for example, and as you have mentioned, there are fragmentation in subsets of groups of community. How do you and your organization navigate to balance all these stakeholders' interests and to really cultivate mutual understanding? And are there any similarities that you heard from Amalia that actually you guys are doing similar things? And yeah, any insight you can share?
I think I resonate with what Amalia has been sharing in terms of her experience being both on the outside and then in the inside, and the kind of challenges that you face in regards to the people who thought that you were with them, now they think that you are against them, and the reality that sometimes that we need to go the extra mile to build the bridges and connect people and also get them to understand. Our experience has been the same in a sense that we work closely with different civil society groups, we work with businesses, we work with government and so on, and we try to remain neutral and objective. And generally people think, or the perception of us is that this is a safe platform, it's a safe space, and this is where people who are in conflict are able to come together and engage and participate. And we actively also reach out to ensure that we work with differing views. That includes opposing views, because the fact is that we need to ensure that we do not create an environment of where everyone becomes a yes man, but rather we need to have that, like I said earlier, contestation and conflicts are things that are needed to build great cities. I think what is needed more importantly is about creating the safe spaces for those contestation and conflicts to take place and to allow for those voices to be heard. So in a lot of our work, what we try to do is also to listen and to allow for people to give their viewpoints and hear them out. Because anyway, there's various rationale and needs or perspectives. And if we are honest and objective of our work, then we need to ensure that those voices are then reflected upon and thought through as we go through the process of deciding and working through the kind of what do you call engagement and so on. All right, what we see is basically a process of not only engagement and participation, but rather we go into deeper much in the sense that they become an actor themselves in the whole process. As a filmmaker, I'm sure Amalia, you have the view to say that how do you able to bring those elements into this? Because I think that those are the things, right? And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, cities is about people, and people make cities. And the more we get a broader variety of people, the greater the better the city will become. It's challenging, difficult, because you can't get the consensus or response that people want immediately, because sometimes there's a sense of urgency to make decisions, but sometimes the extended process is an important one, because at the end of the day, an engaged citizenry is a valuable asset that you would value through time?
Yeah, I have marked here not to forget also to mention, as you say, Hamdan, the skills that I'm going back in this chapter of skills and talents to bring those different voices to keep hearing the contest, the manifestation of disagreement, to be able to allow it, to be articulated. You need facilitation skills. And as you say, people that have the ability to remain neutral and guide, those voices through a process together. Because neutrality is one of the hardest things, it's not to, it's a very difficult thing, and it is a skill that, we should create maybe a university of, a degree, a master's in developing those skills, knowing how to facilitate, how to be, how to develop empathy in the governance sector. I think those are skills, very important skills, very difficult, very sophisticated, that one has to refine all the time.
All right, I think partly the problem arises because, it's most people end up into a profession by virtue of the training they come from the universities and so on. And then they end up practicing their profession. There's other skills that you are mentioning needed, which is very much needed and very central to our success or failure, are things that you pick up along. And the question that arises is that do city parties, leaders and city governments have ability to do this in a more systematic way as opposed to opportunistic? So that's something that maybe I want to ask you, Amelia.
Very, very good question. I mean, I saw in the municipality of Athens, which was the first municipality I ever really learned, and got to know, is that the people that work there, that are city officials that have been there for years and years, they are burnt out very often. Cities are so complex things that have been developing with so many challenges the last years and decades. They're burnt out. They cannot, learn again something new. I mean, so how do you allow for those new skills to enter that? It is with those intermediary bodies like the one you're setting up, Hamdan. You have set up, Hamdan, with Think City. I think that is now how those skills could be included in the among the city officials, or should they come from outside? That's a different question. And it depends so much on the context. There are cities where this has been happening for quite long. I know municipalities in Europe where city officials are really, young with new ideas, and the system, the governance system, can very easily embrace and hire those type of people, and others that are more conservative and more, like in Greece, for example, municipalities are old style places of people that are experts in services that are very important for the city, but often not enough for the city any longer.
All right, I think the policy is in a sense that the world has changed so much. Cities and the way the city governments function is still, I call it that the cities have become an agenda of the 21st century, while city governments are still in the 20th century. The institutions that we have today is something that we inherited in the context of industrial development, where a lot of the city thinking that has come, in fact, the challenges we face today is all from the periods from the past. We are not there dealing with the challenges of the city of the future. In fact, most cities are dealing with the issues of the past, and many are not even in the position to actually figure out how do they build the city of the future and what is the city of the future. And there's a huge shift in terms of what the city of the future is and will be by virtue of the fact that there's going to be a higher level of democratization. There's going to be a higher level of demand from society. There's going to be a higher level of citizens' participation and engagement by virtue of the fact that the digital technology enables all of these things. The question is whether the cities are ready in dealing with it and harness this and embrace it and face the future. And I think that's quite a big. And I think second point, which I think I want to highlight, is saying that that city governments are too often caught within the stricture of what we call government service, civil servants. And there's a need maybe for a revolving door policies to be adopted that allows for a constant participation from people coming from different varied backgrounds, being given the opportunity to serve. Because the whole idea of being in the city is to serve, but not through the process of purely just being an electorate representative, but I think also in the professional capacities, because they then bring the innovation, new thinking, and drive. We talked about burnt out and so on. And the only way you can recharge, renew is to allow for people to revolve. I think in Malaysia, we experimented by deploying civil servants into corporations, for corporations to deploy into civil service and so on. And it's been an interesting experience in a sense that people come with it, they take different perspective and knowledge and skill sets that they then eventually bring back into their practices. And if this done system-wide, it will definitely bring I would think it's only going to be a positive impact.
Exactly, and I think social innovation is playing a very crucial role in this paradigm shift that is needed for the challenges of the 21st century, in opening up the governance model, in bridging models, you know, in a multi-level, what is referred to as multi-level governance.
I think
both horizontally and vertically.
There's a common personality that I think we both may be connected to, Charles Landry, who has been advocating for the idea of a creative bureaucracy. And I think the recent Creative Bureaucracy Festival was an interesting opportunity that showed the new thinking that is needed in governance, right? The whole idea of a name, it's an oxymoron, creative bureaucracy.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a sort of like the new realities that needs to be looked at and reflected upon.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see how we look at public sector innovation, like how do public sector work together with the community to create like for the future or dealing with the past cities issue. But at the same time, what we are talking about is putting people at the center of all the development and putting the community at the center, at the heart of everything we do. So as we're in Wayfinder, we are talking about like how should social innovation, or how will social innovation help shape our future with a future-looking lens. Like I'm sure we are seeing there is an increasing need to have intermediaries who have the skills to harness the intelligence from the community, from the private sector, from the public sector, to really synergize everything, like what Think City has been doing, and like what Amalia, you have been trying to do in the past 10 years, and also maybe in the coming years, you're going to do something similar. So maybe Amalia, do you have any questions to Hamdan? I'm sure you have a lot, but like pick one that you would like to learn or learn more about.
Yeah. Well, I admire very much what you've done with Think City, that you set up, you know, this intermediary body really to help this process. And so of the various things that you do and activities that you provide through Think City, which is, you know, prototyping, probably doing lots of research, co-designing, implementing, what is the thing that makes you stand out and make the difference in what you're trying to do, of all the activities you provide through this Think City platform?
I think the standout for us is that we think, or is basically that we are prepared to take the risk and do things differently. We do not follow the conventional wisdom. You know, I keep saying to my colleagues in my team, I say that if we are repeating what others are doing, then there's no relevance for our existence. We are a frontier disruptor, and we constantly need to disrupt so that we can move the center to the periphery, and the periphery becomes the new center. Because it is at the periphery that we are seeing the new dynamism that's emerging. And I think that's the different way of shifting that conversation, right? so that the center becomes the new periphery, while the periphery becomes the new center. I'm sorry, it's an inverted logic to this. And I personally have, I started my career in investment banking, and then eventually I was in the sovereign wealth fund. I established this organization, also part of being a sovereign wealth fund, where the organization took the fact that there is a need for us to innovate and do things differently. So I was given the leeway to go and establish things like organizations like Think City is one of them, which I was involved in, and there are a few other things that I personally have been involved in establishing as disruptors. Um, um, and part of the reason is that we felt that there's a need for, if Malaysia or Penang and others are going to change, it is about creating this new platforms that allows for disruption to happen in a more systematic, structured, what I would call, I don't know whether it's word technocratic, but rather in a way that is auditable and accountable. Because at the end of the day, we want to ensure there's resources that is spent is yielding results, but at the same time, the things can fail. The way we do things is that the process becomes the basis of what allows us to defend ourselves. And we must prepare to take the risk to do things. And also that be open to doing things that could succeed or fail, or could be totally, innovative or damning, and be open to criticisms. At the end of the day, the judge is the proof in the pudding is in eating it. And the judge is out there to decide whether anything that you do. And sometimes the society is not ready. It takes time. There are things that we were working 10 years ago. It is today that we are seeing that there's energy is emerging in those areas. So sometimes you're ahead of the curve by virtue that you are scanning the globe and you're learning and trying to make sense of it in your local context. And that's the other thing that we need, in the sense that the thinking part of it, constantly figuring out, collaborating, identifying partners, at the same time then localizing, creating synergies, working together with many other collaborators and so on. And eventually that comes the interesting process of execution and co-creating. And that's the journey that we make. I think earlier, Marco, you mentioned about the fact that we all live in an age of disruption. And unfortunately, disruption is something very, unearthing. And by virtue of the fact that, it creates a butterfly in the stomach, because, it means that you are going to create an environment where, as social innovators, we could be disrupting the whole order of things, jobs, livelihoods, and so on. So part of the challenge we also think about is that how do you deal with these issues? I know I don't have the answers to it. The fact that there would be people who will be disrupted, and we can't just say that's a cause of being disrupted. But at the same time, what do you call safety net of fallback that you're able to do to ensure that people disrupted are able to be whether they're skill backed or re-engaged or have the ability to have a future. So I don't know, Amelia, whether you have any particular experiences and so on in those areas.
In the area of disruption and risk taking? Yes, I do.
I think when you disrupt and take risk, you end up making some people redundant in their jobs. How do you deal with those issues?
That's so difficult. Well, human relations is the most difficult thing of all, right? I always adopted, I wanted to adopt not a polemic way of dealing with things, but, because the language of bridging, to come back, to that word, is really the most difficult. For example, in the municipality, there were people that came from such a different tradition from what I had brought in, the platform of informal grassroots initiatives, right? It was like, but in fact, you couldn't make them feel redundant. It would have destroyed the whole effort. So you had to find, that's another, skill of the facilitation process, to find the talent, the uniqueness and talent of each person, And for example, those bureaucrats, those kind of inflexible, hardcore bureaucrats, they, for example, know the system so well. That is incredibly important, because you want bureaucracies. You don't want to get rid of bureaucracies. You want democracy, and therefore you need a mechanism, and the mechanism is called bureaucracy. So take those bureaucrats. I mean, talking about, you know, the extreme opposite to activists and social innovators, you know, those inflexible, caricatural bureaucrats. Take them with you, you know, take them along and see what they have to offer, you know, the knowledge of what a system means, which is incredibly important. I mean, when we had systems in place, it was after huge wars and incredible tragedies. So it is constantly, and that's just one example, you know, of opposition. Similarly, you have to allow, you know, for the anarchist activist, you know, at the time, 10 years ago, you know, I had a teenage boy, my own son, you know, who was, you know, incredibly, you know, naughty, just to use a mother word. And I was constantly thinking that, you know, how do you create a dialogue with those angry adolescents and teenagers that will never listen, you know, to the system, but that have great ideas, you know? So it was about that.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
But maybe it's a woman's attitude to open that, to leave that as a little note.
Yeah. I think it's really important to draw the commonality between, like, how do we see the positive side from each community that they can contribute. And I think that is the art of bridging, like to draw commonality, to help them to see positive angle, that things that they can contribute. So I think it's really important. So talk about that. There's one question from the audience. Like Jenny did ask us, given the COVID-19 restriction on large gatherings and convening in person to build trust and bridge divides, so how can cities engage communities digitally, especially community without access to data, Wi-Fi technology, or even digital literacy or competence? So maybe Amalia or Hamdan, do you have any like thoughts or even experience in?
All right. With COVID, what we did, we were involved in a pilot program that we were experimenting, and the results out of it has been very positive. Basically, it's about engaging the communities who are living in high density homes. Primarily, these are communities that are in the bottom 40, low income families. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, there is a bit of the zoning issues where, you know, the poor areas and so on. There was a need to distribute aid, to identifying with the recipients, down to understanding the specific needs of these communities. So, you know, you can't go out there and do your traditional surveys and engage and everything else. What we deployed was actually to use a very basic instrument. Basically, is that in Malaysia in particular, that nearly everyone seems to have access to some form of telephone or mobile phone. We developed an app that allowed then people to come on board and provide that kind of data, so that we understand them better and understand their needs. Then that allowed us then to figure out how best then the specific aid that is needed could be channeled to them. So this is a program that we call, in Malay it's called Kita to Kita. Kita means we to we. Meaning it's the whole idea of a citizens engagement, and that I think has actually gotten positive traction, and we're now trying to figure out how can we actually scale this into a larger test program, and you know, because we believe that, you know, that the environment of COVID is not going to disappear in the immediate future. It's likely to be there for a longer period, and that's going to be one of those things that we have to deal with in doing this, that there needs new innovation. And that's one of the things that we have actually took a very simple basic technology, and we use that as a basis to continue the ability to engage and participate. We on site, we also created platforms where people are able to then also get on board. So if for those who are without any form of device, And we also try to understand the percentage of people who don't have device, and we're trying to work out with see whether there are options to even provide those devices for free. Because at the end of the day, there is a certain mobile telephony has become like electricity. So every city or country eventually is going to be measured eventually to see whether citizens have access, and those becomes powerful platforms that you can deploy, utilize as a basis for citizens engagement in the future.
Yeah, I think to map out the current existing system, that how can we leverage on, that is something that we should look at. So I think one question from 16 actually, are you guys like when we talk about going back to the very early conversation, when we talk about music, when we talk about culture, um, how do we think more widely about bridging? Like, because social innovation is about seeing things as a whole in a system, and how do you see the role of music, art, environment? How can different medium be better used or utilized to harness the skills and capacities of the citizens? And yeah, so what do you think about the role of different medium to harness the skills, harness the intelligence from the community? Do you have any like experience? And Amalia, like you're from a cultural background. What do you think about that?
Well, I'd like to jump on a metaphorical example that, music is really the language that everybody understands, right? And in what we're doing, this is what we have to invent, right? The language that everybody understands. Again, coming back to bridging, as you say. And culture, I mean, art is the language that everybody understands, no matter where they come from. And, you have to allow for the development of this, of a new, I don't know, governmental lingua franca, which is, the art, the music that everybody understands and can share the experience of. I think it allows each person also to hear it in their own way, understand it in their own way, but the same thing.
The interpretation.
We embrace the idea of what we call artistic expressions and everything in a lot of things that we do. Because I think we believe that there is value and ability to use that as a form of the tool for not only engagement but expression and understanding, and that has helped us. We have done. We even given birth to festival. You can look up Georgetown Festival. All communities in Penang, in particular, they have a lot of various cultural celebrations and events, which becomes part of the city's fabric of expressing. And then same time, we also use art as a tool towards regeneration and so on, where bringing art into rehabilitating depressed areas or spaces that were not utilized. Then eventually that we showed created the kind of beauty and perspectives that all of a sudden create, in this age of Instagramming, all of a sudden you find that people jump into this bandwagon and that creates traffic, and traffic creates footfall. Footfall means that the new types of activities starts coming into that area, regenerating. So we have had that positive experience, not only in Georgetown, but rather in the different cities that now we have been working on. So it's interesting to see that that there is value in bringing arts, creative expression, and also cultural communities in the process of rehabilitating, regenerating, and repositioning cities.
Yeah, it's to me like art. I'm personally art lover, and like as I said, musical theater like performer, amateur of course, but I always see like the how art and social innovation meets, because art is something very unique that is universal, that everyone can have a linkage, can interpret themselves, but at the same time we are having a bigger like backdrop, like having this art piece bridging us together or connecting us in a different way. So and as it's very interesting to see how you guys use art and perceive culture as one of the way to engage. We have one question from the audience. So Cohen like agree with what we have been talking, but from his experience, it's rather challenging to involve the bureaucrats. Because it means giving them a platform to actively challenge and discredit the innovation they feel threatened by. So it will take a lot of time and effort to involve these actors from across the system and a high risk of backlashing. So what do you guys recommend to do in this situation? And what powers do we have or need to make change happen? And I think one of the things we previously have already touched on, to have an intermediary, to have this kind of bridging person to do the cultural translator. But culture means that, like the bureaucratic system, they have a certain culture, the community have a certain culture in how they speak, but how to have a middle person to talk to each other. That is one thing we touch on. But any other thing that you recommend or
I'll probably let Amelia answer, but maybe I'll just say that it depends on whether, you know, the person who's the hardcore is a bad hat or is a genuine, honest bureaucrat. If it's a bad hat, then it's a different problem, because that's about self-serving. If it's a genuine bureaucrat, I believe then it's a question of whether that you are able to bring that different experience and perspective. We have had experience where by bringing them to go and sometimes see those type of things that we're talking about or expressing and so on, opens up their perspectives and minds, and maybe give the benefit of doubt after those learnings and so on. So it's more with those who are good bureaucrats, who are hardcore. It's more about widening their perspectives and helping them to then see the kind of risk that they may need to take based on experiences elsewhere, or lessons that they can pick from elsewhere. With regards to the bad hat, I leave that to the agencies who need to deal with them to deal with those issues.
Amalia, do you have anything to add on this question?
Just an example that, you know, after a while, after we had made the platform for the municipality, I realized that some of the city officials inside the municipality on weekends were activists in the city, the same people. So, you know, people are not single, you know, they're not only, you know, how do you say the word? You know, they're not just one type, you know, we combine different aspects in ourselves. So look for those. That's the answer to Cohen. Look for those that have those other sides, those hidden sides in them.
Yeah. So identifying like-minded players and understanding them comprehensively, instead of, oh, because they are bureaucrats that they think like this and they are
exactly.
Yeah. So one last question before we end. Are you genuinely positive about the future, and why? And how can social innovation play a role based on that? So to end this conversation, I think, with these questions, are you generally positive or negative about the future, and why? And how can social innovation play a role? So maybe we'll have Hamdan first, and then Amalia.
Sure. I will say that the COVID is a crisis that will reset the world. And it's a question whether we are going to learn what this crisis is warning us. And the fact is that we are faced with big challenges even before the crisis, about climate change, inequality, jobless growth, and so on. And these are major issues that we are face as human society. Now, I personally think there's plenty that the social innovation space can do, by virtue of the fact that these are problems that what I call the conventional businesses are not able to resolve. And it's a question whether that social innovators believe they want to do or can do, take an attitude that they would like to actually do something different. And there needs to shift the conversation away from the idea of what I call acting in the interest of shareholders or to stakeholders and reshaping a new narrative, because I think the world is in need, the world is calling for it. It's a question of whether we as social innovators are going to respond and bring new approaches to deal with the kind of challenges and issues in society that we're faced with. And it's staring in front of us. COVID is just a warning. Then this could be a larger scale warnings that could come and hit us, and whether we are there to deal with it. And maybe the last thing, maybe I will say also that COVID definitely has created an issue about regards to whether cities will be relevant for the future. I personally have the view that cities is going to be very much part of human life over the century and beyond, by virtue of the fact that it's the best place to do things. The challenge lies whether we can create the social innovation to make cities a great place again, and places of hope and possibility. Thank you.
Amalia?
Okay, well, I think that with the previous crisis, the prevailing emotion, let's say, was anger. In this crisis, I think it is pessimism. And I think the role of social innovation is very important, because what we seem to be realizing is that we have to strengthen the public sector, but strengthen it through collaboration with all the institutions and knowledge of society, whether it comes from the grassroots communities or it comes from other institutions, all about enriching the public sector with the collective intelligence that it has at hand. I think that the public sector has to be strengthened, and it's been weakened in the last decades by constantly outsourcing capacity. But now we have to through social innovation, to rebuild the confidence of the public sector. Yeah. In a way, and I think that is the way that we're going to maybe be able to make it through what's coming ahead of us.
Thank you.
If I can just say this, that currently there's a lot been said about build back better, build back green. I think build back humanity.
Yeah.
Okay. Everything.
Thank you, Amalia. Thank you.
Okay.
I think social innovation really, like Charlie Leibiter, like in the previous SIXWayfinder mentioned, like how does social innovation play a role in crisis? And I think it's really inspiring to me is social innovation provide alternative imagination. It's an escapism and also resistance. Like how do we fight and live in truth? And how do we cope with better capabilities? So I think even though the world is seemingly pessimistic, but social innovation really play a role for us to have alternative social imagination. Thank you again, Amalia. Thank you again, Hamdan, for being with us. And thank you all the audience who are with us today with this global dialogue, open duet at Wayfinder. So we'll be having some more open duets on Thursday. Check out our Twitter. You will get more information, be registered, and we'll see you again. Thanks again, and good afternoon, good evening, good night for wherever you're at.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.